All right, I counted to 10, so I think we're just going to go. All right. I'd like to call the City of Mount Vernon City Council meeting for May 13, 2020 to order. The time is now 7 p.m. Welcome to everyone who's watching on YouTube or on our conference line or watching on TV 10. Item B is our roll call of council members, so I'll call the roll. Council Member Moberg.
Here.
Council Member Molinar.
Here.
Council Member Beaton.
Here.
Council Member Hulst.
Here.
Council Member Hudson.
Here.
Council Member Corrias.
Here.
And Council Member Brocksmith.
Here.
All right, thank you. Under our consent agenda tonight, we have items A, B, and C. It's the approval of council meeting minutes, payroll checks, and claims.
I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Mark and a second by Aaron. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Under reports tonight, we have published a review of emails from the public, which I have not received any to the address that is posted, and just double checking with council, no one had received any other ones to that address. All right. Moving on then to new business. Item A is a virtual public hearing. This is for the 2020 through 2021 CDBG Annual Action Plan, and Peter Donovan will present this item. Peter?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is an open record public hearing to obtain the views of citizens and other interested parties on the draft community development block grant, the CDBG 2020 Action Plan. The 5-day public review and comment period for the 2020 to 2021 draft action plan extended from May 7th until today, until May 13th today. During these past 5 days, the public has been invited to obtain the draft action plan and to provide written comment on it. And the city has received just one comment on the plan from the public, and it will be read into the record tonight. That's how we'll do our public hearing tonight. This one comes from Mount Vernon Chamber of Commerce CEO, Andy Mayer. Andy writes, Mayor Boudreau and City Council, as you decide how to allocate relief funds in our community, please keep in mind the dire situation that most small businesses are in. Many were not eligible for or able to access federal loan programs. They have had almost no income for a couple of months and are unlikely to be able to resume their previous sales anytime soon. What they are likely to be is out of business quite quickly. I realize that the funds are limited and the needs are great, but whatever percentage of the funds can be directed towards small businesses will help them stay in business and continue to provide jobs for residents of our community. Thanks, Andy. So that is our one comment on the action plan. Council may recall that the amount of the city's 2020 to 2021 CDBG allotment is $383,922, and that an additional amount of $225,849 has been provided for COVID-19 impact response through the Federal CARES Act. Now, in order to disperse that funding into our community more quickly, the following amendments to the City of Mount Vernon's past action plans are required. So tonight, the city needs to amend the 2018-2019 action plan with the goal of increasing the supply of affordable owner-occupied housing and to adjust the goal outcome indicator from 4 households assisted to 2 households assisted. We need to amend the 2019-2020 action plan goal outcome indicator, which will allow the city to include an additional $225,849 in CDBG CV funds. Those are those COVID relief funds. We will also amend the 2015-16 plan to clarify the redirection of unused funds to property acquisition related to new rental housing development in 2020. We'll also be amending the 2018 to 2022 consolidated plan, adding public services and micro enterprise assistance as activities that may use COVID-19 relief funding from the CARES Act. And finally, we are amending our citizen participation plan to address circumstances when a disaster or other emergency requires additional CDBG activities and the use of additional CDBG funding to address an emergency. So with these amendments, the City of Mount Vernon will be positioned to more effectively utilize federal resources to address local needs. The mayor and city council have worked within HUD regulations to provide a fast and efficient way to put federal dollars into the pockets of Mount Vernon residents and business owners who desperately need that support in these difficult times. The 2020-2021 draft action plan and additional COVID relief funding includes the following allocations: $110,000 to EDASC for small business grants, $110,000 to community action for rental assistance, $110,000 to public facilities revitalization for the downtown flood wall loan, $100,000 to Skagit Habitat for Humanity for homebuyer assistance, $53,834 to Friendship House for acquiring property to increase supply of affordable housing, $12,500 to the Mount Vernon Downtown Association for small business support, $57,588 to Community Action of Skagit County for public services and efforts to reduce poverty, $55,849 for planning and administration. These allocations total $609,771 in federal funding administered through the city, going directly to the needs of our Mount Vernon community. And with that, staff is seeking a motion to approve the 2020-2021 draft annual action plan, as well as the aforementioned amendments to the 2018 action plan, 2019 action plan, the 2015-16 action plan, and the 2018 to 22 consolidated plan, and the citizen participation plan.
All right, Peter, for that presentation. Any questions from City Council about all of the actions contained in this action item?
I don't have any questions about the actions in the or the items in the actual proposal here, but my question would be to Kevin, because it is an open public record hearing. Are we conforming to the law by not having the availability for the public to speak this evening?
That's a good question, Councilmember Hulse. The law does not afford a right for people to generally have the ability to provide public comment in a legislative city council meeting. There's no statute that requires public participation. This is purely a requirement of the grant. And so long as we comply with the grant conditions, which I have been told we do, to allow comment in this format or medium, that is what is concerning, or the risk to the city, which would be qualifying with all those conditions so you keep your money.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Okay. And just reiterating again, it's our kind of our traditional CDBG funding, but also the additional for the COVID relief. And that allocation has been split down the middle, one going for small business micro grants, which EDASC would administer for us. The other half going to community action for their rental assistance program. That is something that has been recommended. If council wants to change that, that's up to you. We also believe, and Peter, if you want to speak to, there's possibility of additional federal funding that may be coming through as well in the future.
Yeah, we understand that in the CARES Act funding, there was $5 billion set aside, and that the first, this allocation to Mount Vernon of $225,000 for COVID relief, sort of the first of that $5 billion, a piece of that $5 billion. So that to say that possibly later this summer, there would be another allocation to the city.
Okay. Any other further questions on this particular item?
And I make one comment to get into the record. I just wanted to be transparent that I serve as the chair of the board of directors of Community Action in Skagit, but I serve in that role as a volunteer. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
All right.
I would like to move that we approve the 2020 to 2021 draft annual action plan, as well as all of the aforementioned amendments and citizen participation plan.
Right.
Second.
Motion by Mary. Was that a second by Gary?
Yeah.
All right. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you to Peter and Carrie and our contractor, Paul Schisler, who went through all those things in record speed to get this plan adopted. So thank you. All right. Item B tonight is the approval of an agreement with Fire Marshal Services. And Chief Brian Bryce is on the line, and he's going to present this item unless Assistant Chief Brian Harris is going to do that. Assistant Chief Brian Harris is going to present. Brian.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Before you tonight is an interlocal agreement that we would like to enter into with the county. As you are well aware, our fire marshal has separated from service for position elsewhere, leaving us without a fire marshal and a primary fire investigator for the city of Mount Vernon. Currently, we have an agreement with Burlington and Anacortes for services. But just in case they are not available, we'd also like to enter into agreement with the county for them to provide services for us in the event that we need someone to assist us in investigation of a fire in the city of Mount Vernon. So we recommend a do pass with this agreement with the county. And that's pretty much it. Any questions?
Any questions for Assistant Chief Harris on this particular item? This is something that we would have in place. We're not stopping the hiring of that position, just if you're wondering. We just have to go through a hiring process, and that could take some time. So having this in place would just be helpful to us in case there was a fire.
I would like, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll make the motion that the mayor enter into the contract with Skagit County Department of EMS.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Melissa. We'll give a second to Mary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item C tonight is the ratification of emergency executive orders. Our city attorney, Kevin Rogerson, will present this item. Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor. Members of City Council, before you is an executive order number 2020-006. As you know, the mayor, or the office of the mayor, is delegated emergency powers upon the proclamation and ratification of an emergency which was declared in the current emergency on May 11th and actually ratified on that same day. However, in the exercise of the office of the mayor's emergency powers, it does require a ratification of such executive orders at the next available council meeting. There is an order before you which in substance does not change the status quo, but it extends pre-existing orders 2020-002 and 2020-003, which had the effect of closing public facilities and playgrounds in the library, which dovetails basically with the governor's current orders and would be extended until midnight, June 3rd, 2020, unless extended beyond that date. There was another order, if you recall, 2020-001, which extended some temporary permits. However, that will not be extended because those people have been relocated.
Okay. Any questions for Kevin on this item?
No, I would move the ratification of the executive orders issued by the mayor.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Motion by Mark and a second by Melissa. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Now, for the good of the order tonight, this is our just a COVID-19 pandemic response and discussion. I have 4 things that I wanted to bring before council. One is a department update. So you'll see some of the directors that are on the line. We'll have a finance update, a development services update, police and fire, and that way you can ask questions of those department directors. There is a financial memo discussion, so I put that out in your council packets after meeting with our small group committee of Mark, Mary, and Aaron, so talk through that. There's also a draft legislative priorities that was in your packet that I thought we could talk through. And then I thought I could give you an update on our reopening planning efforts that are underway. So with those things, I think I'll ask Doug to go first. I'm going to attempt to share my screen and some slides that he prepared. So see if I can do this. All right. Can everyone see? Oh, shoot. The little pictures kind of go over some of it. But can people mostly see the slides? Okay.
I think we're good, Mayor.
Okay, great.
So thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. So I thought I'd just go over just a few of the revenues that we've been looking at right now. I've been keeping a lot closer tab on all of our different revenues that we are currently bringing in, and just thought I would talk about some of the bigger ones at this point. Right now, as far as the one you're looking at here is our total general fund revenue through April. As you can see, right now we brought in about $6.6 million, and if we were to stick by the budgeted amount, we should be about 7.2 million almost. So we're about a $500,000 under at this point. Looking down below there, you can see that you can't see the percentages there, but we did have some good months. In January, well, January was down a little bit, but February and March were pretty high, up to 12% and another 4%. But this month in April, we're down about $403,000 from what we brought in last year. So at this point last year, we were at 6.8 million, and currently right now in 2020, for the first 4 months, we're at $6.6 million. So we're about $225,000 below where we were overall in general fund money. I've been noticing a lot of the revenues that are coming in, they are coming in slower. Not that they're coming, some are coming in lower, but we're also not receiving all of them yet. So it's playing catch up. So anyway, but this is what we have on the books right now for our overall general fund. Moving on to the next one, this slide represents all of our tax revenue, all the tax revenue the city collects. And as you can see there, we brought in through the month of April almost $5.5 million, and which is about $64,000 above where we would be budgetarily that we thought we'd be coming in. So just a little over 1% higher than where we would be on the budget. So that's good. But looking down below, you can see again, the first 3 months were really high. January, we were about almost 12% above what we were planned or brought in January of last year, 10% higher than February, and over 7% higher in March. But we did see a substantial drop of almost 18%, or $294,000 in April. Because of those better months, the beginning there, we're still about $70,000 above what we brought in last year at this time. Any questions there? And I will move on to property tax. So first of all, property tax and REIT we get from the county, and so we actually receive that revenue faster than we do than the other taxes from the state. So I did get the county numbers just came in, so I did pop those in here. So this one is for 5 months through May, and we did get our big property tax payment in May. Again, this represents only the general fund portion of it, but we brought in $1.9 million. When we were doing the forecast of what we're going to be possibly losing or where we're going to be underfunded this year, I projected about a 10% decrease overall in property taxes. We didn't see that. That is not how it came in here, so that's all good so far anyway. So people are paying their property taxes for this first come. And again, remember, they have an extension to July to actually pay their property taxes. So it looks like everybody pretty much was on board here anyway. So we're about $71,000 below, or 3% below of where we should be budgetarily of bringing property taxes in. And as you can see down below there, we're about $52,000 under what we brought in last year at this time. Any questions for that one? And then sales tax, we brought in about $2.4 million through the month of April. And again, this is through April here. And that's about $42,000 below where we should be budgetarily, just a little under 2%. And then as you can see on the bottom right there, we're about $28,000 below what we thought we would be bringing in from what we brought in 2019 at this point. So we're still, pretty close to where we thought we'd be. I remember our budgets are pretty much the same last year, what we brought in last year and this year. So we are seeing a little lower. And again, though, this is 2 months in behind. So this April is actually the February amounts coming in. And then moving on to TBD. TBD, you'll see we brought in $566,000. We're right where we were planned on being right now. We did have some higher months in there at the beginning, like we did with our other sales tax. But then on the very bottom there, you'll see we're just about where we needed to be. We're about 7%, or excuse me, 1% lower than what we brought in the first 4 months of last year. So about $7,000 below. And then I think the last one I have there is talking about our REIT money. And again, this comes in from the county. So I did get those numbers I just popped in here for the month of May. And we brought in a total of $578,000 for both REITs. This is a combination of REIT 1 and REIT 2. And we're about $141,000 above the budgeted amount at this point. And then looking down below, we are at about 27% higher than we were last year at this time. We brought in about $123,000 more than we did the first 5 months of 2019. So, we're expecting to see this one dropping. We know we're bringing things up with construction and stuff. So hopefully, we can hold the pace up here and do well with our REIT funding. And that is all I had for tonight. If there's any questions on any of these particular ones or any other revenues, I might be able to help you with that.
Any questions for Doug on this? Okay.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to stop the screen share. Okay. We can also send those to you if you'd like, or put them in the council drive. So whatever you'd like us to do on that. Okay.
Bill,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Would you drop those into our drive for me?
Yes.
Those slides.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I'll send you a link to the pathway.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, next up, Chris Phillips has joined us tonight. He's prepared some information from Development Services, and so he also has some slides. So I'm going to do this again, see if I can get his slides up. Hold on. And here we go.
All right. Well, hi, Council. It's been a few
There we go.
months. There.
Did we lose Chris?
No, I'm here. Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
There we go. Okay.
If you could, I think just advance. It's the.
Yep.
On the application. Revenue.
Is it Chris's audio? Is it me or is it Chris?
No, I'm not hearing him either, or getting in and out.
Okay.
It's Chris's connection.
It's a connection, maybe. Yeah.
So maybe, Chris, if you could stop your video, that might help the rest of the bandwidth.
How's that?
That seems better.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, I will do this. Thank you, Councilmember Brocksmith. Appreciate that. So what I'll be updating you on tonight is just the permit application, inspection update, as well as permit revenue. And these were key indicators that I had. As you all know, 1/3 of my staff, or 1/3 of our staff in development services, has been furloughed. And as I was going through and looking at data, I just wanted to make sure that I was able to provide some decent lead indicators to leadership so that they will be able to action information as it related to a variety of different things that we'll be experiencing down in development services. And with that, Mayor, could you hit the next one? So as you can see, the big part for us was we were really going better than any year prior to 2003-04 timeframe, which was kind of the heyday of building in Mount Vernon. As you can see, the construction update on March 23rd, that's basically the stay home, stay healthy, came out, and you can see we fell like a very, very hard. We decreased significantly as far as every type of application that was coming in. It wasn't that we weren't processing any, it's just that the frequency or the number of permits that were in. So quite frankly, staff over the last 5 weeks has been able to really work with our customers to ensure that when we get to phase 2 of construction, and that should happen here hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be ready to be issuing permits, and then you'll see the continued increase in the number of inspections as well as our revenue. You can see here that when phase 1 was implemented back just a few weeks ago, you can see we had an immediate effect in the total number of applications that were being submitted. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those as it relates to applications.
I think let's do the next 2 slides, and then
Okay,
there may
sure
be some
thing.
questions for that. So, okay.
And next slide here is inspections. And again, we were off the chart in the beginning of the first 3 months of, the first 3 months of the year. When March hit, once that construction update came in, you can see things just fell greatly because quite frankly, there was no construction that was being done within the city except that was deemed essential. The only essential project that we had in the city was at the school district. So the Mount Vernon Senior High School. So a variety of permits that were up there and projects that were going on. The Fine Arts Building was one, and then they have another, Old Main is getting ready to be started. But you can see when restart happened on the 24th, you can see that it was not a U-shaped recovery, it was a V. So our building official right now is doing all of our building inspections, as well as doing plan review. So just to kind of give you an idea, about 13 a day is what an inspector can do. And that's a full day's worth of work. He's pretty close right now to averaging somewhere between 10 and 12. So we're still getting a little bit of plan review out of him, but for the most part, he is in the field doing inspections or doing virtual inspections. As you know, we've been doing Skype inspections for a variety of home constructions or tenant improvements that are enclosed type of inspections that are required just to minimize his exposure to other folks. And then the same way with our engineering permits. And if you think of those, it's moving dirt, you know, so you got your, it's okay. You got your filling grade permits. So that's the stuff that's moving dirt. So again, initially things had stopped, but all the permits, if they were dated prior to March 23rd, they are out there doing work, and there is a variety of safety precautions that they need to adhere to, that L&I is the enforcement, the city and our code enforcement and our inspectors are the education piece to that. So we've been out, and I get out as well. And I tell you, folks are really getting, you know, they are back to work. They're using the proper procedures. They're social distancing, masks, gloves, wash areas that are included there, the training that's there. And I know that L&I inspectors have been through our city to those particular sites, and all we've got is positive reviews. So good news there. Very close work and coordination with SICPA, and again, no issues from that standpoint. But again, as we start to increase the number of inspections, which I would imagine continuing this week, we've had a banner week for the first 3 days of the week. That may be something I'll be coming back to leadership on, that we either A, have to change maybe a level of service, or B, bring back one of our furloughed employees so that we can continue to support the construction activity in town.
Can I ask a question on that slide?
Sure.
We can't see the far right of that page, and I'm just wondering, can you tell me on the total inspections where the top of that line hits on this numbers? The yellow line, where is it on the left, if you would, on that graph part?
Sure.
Can you see it now? If I did that, can anyone? No?
I think each individual can minimize the video thumbprints. So if you go to the top of the videos and hit the minimize button, then you should be able to see the images.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
But I'll give you the voiceover there, Councilmember Hudson, too, is in the peak. If you look at between week 10 and 11 of this year, we were averaging somewhere around 150 total inspections. Right now, on week 18, I think we were a total of 45.
Okay.
But again, at that time, with the 140 to 150, you had basically 4 folks that were able to go out there, and we have that contractor. Remember from 2020's budget that we had coming in as well that was augmenting the building permits, so or the building inspection. Sorry about that. So they were fully engaged there. But like I said, I can't necessarily justify anything now other than where the furloughs for my department completely understand and support. But again, as the numbers start to increase, there may be just another conversation to go on of either continuing furlough or we just change level of service. But that'll be a conversation for y'all to have, and we'll execute the plan of the day.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, ma'am. The next slide gets into revenues, and again, Doug does it for the macro. I take it in my department on the micro side of the house, so you can see again. 2020 is the gold line that's there, and we were doing gangbusters. So if you look at the other 2 slides, this corresponds 100% with those numbers up until the 23rd of March, and it was almost like all systems stopped. So to give you an idea of total revenue, which would include impact fees, in the month of March, we did slightly over $225,000. In the month of April, all those fees were $14,000 total. Okay, so I mean, a significant drop. For this particular month, again, we're I think eight or 9, well, maybe 10 working days into the month. We're well over $60,000 total fees. So you can see we are definitely moving in the right direction. And if you want to think about it, from March 23rd, all those permits, whether they be filling grade, building, what have you, are all sanctioned by the governor now to continue work. So I would anticipate, from what I'm looking at SmartGov now, that we will continue to be moving in a good trajectory as it relates to that. And I've had other businesses. One was Columbia Forklift. So think South Mount Vernon and the construction down there on a vacant lot. That's been some issues they've been dealing with just due to a few items with critical areas that they needed to work through. They came back to us last week and are ready to start sometime this summer with moving dirt and getting things moving with that particular project. And then we would assume that Pepe, that's just south of them, once those enhancements come in, that they will be doing the same thing. So we've got some good indicators right now. Same way with single family and multifamily residential, we're moving through. We're still conducting pre-apps, all that being done virtually. And with that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions for Chris? I think it's an encouraging update from that department for sure. So, all right. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll move on to our police department update. And so Chief Kamek has joined us tonight, and he can answer questions for you too.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a quick update on some of the things that we've been working on. Service call wise, kind of like I said a few weeks ago when we were together, we're still fairly close to on par for where we're at last year. Our total calls for service are only down about 6%, but we're shifting in the different call areas. From a planning side of things, it's now shifted kind of in this cycle to the phased reopening. So last week we had signaled from municipal court that they were possibly going to open May 18th. And so it shifted gears for us to take a look at public areas, courtrooms, and how to address it with the distancing and the requirements that are recommended by the county and obviously from the governor's office as well that were coming in. So we were looking at public area spacing, courtroom spacing, working with the district court staff on their plan for inside there. Chris Phillips was part of that as well. We had meetings looking at relocating furniture and setting up disinfectant stations, signage, and then kind of using that too, I think, as a model for some of the other city departments as they decided to move. Last Friday, though, I got a call and the court courts had changed direction on that, and so they're not going to open, which is good because it gives us a little bit more time for planning purposes and things. So we're just finalizing some of the safety guards and some of the protocols that we'll have as we allow more of the public back into our facility than we have now. We're going to start fingerprinting again, which I know has been something that the public has asked about, both for concealed carry permits and employment permits and stuff like that on Wednesday, the 20th. Just want to say a big thanks to Sheriff Don McDermott. We were going to have to do it manually. Our old system required a lot of close contact. They have an electronic scanning device that we can just walk the person through, giving verbal instruction. Sheriff McDermott has a portable unit that they're using down at the sheriff's office, and he invited all of the agencies to be able to do that. So we will take advantage of that, and we'll be scheduling then fingerprinting services to happen, and our staff will go down there. We used to just have an open block and people could walk in, but since we're sending staff down, our records manager, Jennifer Messina, has set up a system for signing up, and they'll come down and get their permits. So that's probably been the biggest amount of our focus right now is looking at this, phased reopening and how that's going to look for bringing programming and volunteers and the public back into our operations. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions for Chris? Okay, you know how to get a hold of him if you need to. So, all right. And then Chief Bryce is up with an update on the fire department and the unified command he's been volunteering for. Chief?
Yeah, so from the fire department side, I think the real positive is we don't have anybody out sick with regards to any COVID exposures or anything like that. That was obviously a big concern when this all started out, but we've by having everybody utilize their right personal protective equipment, making sure we have that available. Knock on wood, nobody has been exposed and gotten the disease, which is really good. We still struggle a little bit with the supplies and keeping those in hand. We're still searching everywhere we can to make sure we have enough supplies on hand to not only supply us, but the police department and other folks here in the city. Kind of similar to Chris, we've seen over the last month specifically the month of April, there's been about a decrease of 3 calls per day on average that we're down. That's not necessarily bad. It just means that there's less transports associated with that as well. Our transport rate has gone from 75% down to 67%. So not only is the call volume down, those that do call us are not riding to the hospitals. I don't know if that's just coincidental or if that just happens to be a time period. We'll keep an eye on that and see how that goes going forward. So that's kind of the update from within the department. From the Unified Command, the biggest thing over the last few weeks has been the testing up at Skagit Valley College. So just a few numbers for you. That first week that we opened up to the public, we tested 650 folks. That week we had 27 positive tests from that. The second week we had only 486, so we were less 164 tests that week, but we still had 25 positives for that week, even though we tested less. This week has been kind of an up and down. As an example, on Monday we tested 62 folks. Tuesday we did 118. Today we did 215. There was over an hour wait for folks to go through the testing process. Part of that was the article that came out, some updated messaging on Facebook, some videos. So again, we're just keeping an eye on that. I think the big takeaway and what we keep reinforcing with the folks that are working there and through Unified Command is some folks may say, well, that's only 25 people that tested positive, but that's 25 people that have 4 to 6 contacts that no longer will. Now that we're testing more asymptomatic or lower symptom folks that might not know, it's really starting to remove them from that spread and contamination. So initially our numbers are going to seem to be a little bit higher from the numbers here in the county, but we're hoping over the next couple of weeks we'll see how that affects now that we're able to identify them earlier and then get them into quarantine and isolation quicker. But coincidentally, we're also curious to see what happens in the next couple of weeks following the Mother's Day event, meaning a lot of folks that we saw had information back, spending time with families, with mothers, which is understandable. But there was a great concern what that will do now because it brings families close together, and does that keep the spread going? So we're curious to see how that goes and then how Memorial Day affects that. There's currently no time frame for everybody asks, how long are we going to be doing the testing? We don't know. It's as long as we need to. As you know, the governor's request has been that we have robust testing, quick isolation and case follow-up, which I'm very proud to report that we have that. One of the few counties in the state that have the testing, that had it as early as we did, and are testing as many folks. Again, just to kind of put it in perspective, the busiest day that Snohomish County ever had was 225 people that they tested at their facility. And as you know, their population is far greater than ours. And for us to have 215 come through today was a major event. With that, open to any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Chief Bryce? Okay. Again, it's real valuable to have him in the unified command position. So it's good to have him working with the county. So, okay. All right, then. The next thing is to go over the financial memo discussion. And so that was included in the packet. I thought that I would just pull it up on the screen and kind of go through section by section and then have answer any questions that you have. Again, the point was to bring in a small group of council members to go over just our sort of planning on the revenue shortfalls that we know that we're going to be realizing by the end of the year. So I appreciate the time, the council members that volunteered to do that. I'm going to share my screen now. If I can see where I opened the file. Sorry, give me a minute.
No pressure.
Like I said, this is always makes me nervous. So I have to close these screens first. Apologize.
Oh, where'd you go, Mayor?
Okay. Okay, I am ready to share. I am sorry. Okay, now I need to make that a little bit bigger, right? Okay, how's that? Everyone can see as we'll kind of scroll through the memo. Does that sound okay? Okay, good. The part of the memo is just kind of recapping since our council meeting on April 22nd. There is that separate memo that we had initially put out. Wanted to draw attention to a couple of things. We did revise the revenue projection for the EMS ambulance service, and for exactly what Chief Bryce sort of indicated, where transports are down, therefore any revenues for or billing for those particular collections would be down as well. So that's why when we scroll down a little bit farther, you'll see an estimated of 5.35 revenue projection loss rather than 5.1, which we spoke about a couple weeks ago. We have extended the current staff furloughs from June to June 10 for part-time employees and to June 15 for full-time employees. There was a request that went to Governor Inslee to suspend our routine audits for the city for this year, and we had a potential savings of $78,000 for that. However, that was referred to the other elected official, State Auditor Pat McCarthy, who has the authority under that, and she has declined to suspend the audit. Separate elected officials get to decide what they want to do. Okay, the next thing is we've had some meetings with our labor groups, brought up potential concessions in working collaboratively with both fire, police, and our Teamsters. We've kept our continuity of operations going, and then our special finance committee met 3 different times. On the collaboration with the city council, we felt it important to make decisions based on goals, not just sort of randomized taking stabs at things, but to really think about goals of what we were trying to do. And so that was to really maintain essential staffing levels in order to achieve work demands with legal requirements and mitigate risk. So just an example of that is our police department records department. So, we've got maybe courts that are not meeting at the time. So there's going to be backlogs of case filings and getting things ready. There's still coming public records in. So we don't want to cut so deep in furloughing or staffing cuts that then provide more risk to the city. So hopefully that's an example that you can relate to. The other thing was also planning for that total revenue shortfall in different phases. So there's currently actions that we can take immediately, which we have, things like hiring freeze and spending freezes. But then, Doug shared some of the revenue pictures so far, but we've got so much more to learn about the effects of revenue collections. And so we've got a June to August timeframe that we need to look at. Then we'll look at the September through the end of the year and beyond to 2021 and 2022. Lots of decisions for all those phases. The idea that we would try to continue our capital projects that are underway. There's very little impact to the general fund at this point for those projects. And we want to be able to be forward thinking to take advantage of any stimulus funding opportunities that could come our way. We want to create a unified message to our staff and to the public, and then also determine a usage of fund balance when that decision comes. Timing wise, it certainly isn't right now, but it will come. What would that appropriate percentage and at what stage we would utilize the fund balance? So since we last met, we have the opportunity to take advantage of some federal funding. This was a decision from Governor Inslee to share some of the CARES Act funds with the cities. And as you know, or perhaps you've seen the press release on that, where he did that based on population. In the memo, I added just some of the main criteria. The city will be working with Department of Commerce through Office of Financial Management to receive the funding, and the state anticipates this will be a reimbursement program. We won't just get the check, but that we will have to submit and get reimbursement from Department of Commerce for expenses. So more details on how that will work are coming forward from the state. We just haven't received that yet. So in real careful consideration of what we can use the funding for and what our expenses are, this is the chart that included based on our discussion of the proposed allocation. Taking that allocation and making priorities from that. One is to try and recoup any expenditures that we can that are allowed. We cannot use it to supplant revenue that has been reduced or to pay for operations, but we can use it to offset any unemployment liability or the federal paid leave entitlement. So through the CARES Act, the federal government granted additional leave to our employees, but gave us no money to cover that. And so this is the funding that could help us cover that. So you'll see here under the priority of unemployment liability of about $465,000 and a federal paid leave entitlement liability of around $70,000. The second is a priority 2, and this is where you see an asterisk there after the description, portions of salaries of employees dedicated to the response and PPE or general facilities. That could be reimbursed through FEMA, but we don't know that yet. But we wanted to account for it if that didn't come through FEMA, that we could account for it through this funding, which is an allowable use. Now, if we receive funding reimbursement through another source, then clearly that money would be added to things that are in priority 3 that could be expenses to use the funding for. Priority 3 here, you'll see the majority of the money would go to technological equipment that's necessary for telecommuting and first responders. So that's things like adding to our laptops or updating really old laptops with the city for telecommuting, headphones, docking stations so that folks can do that telecommuting, and necessary for first responders, which would assist us in updating very old equipment that's in our police vehicles and in fire trucks for our first responders now. Our IS director, Kim Kleppe, went through and did a line by line, equipment by equipment audit of what we needed. And the total budgeted to get us completely up to speed was just over $600,000. So there's definitely a need for technology upgrades as we have funding that becomes available. The second line that you see on this under priority 3 is a fingerprint scanner. Chief Kamek gave the perfect segue into why we put that line in here in providing fingerprint services to the public, which we have to do through police. We've done it that old school, roll the finger in the ink and put it on the paper. If we can purchase a fingerprint scanner, it would be a no touch, but it would also allow for the ability to see if the print was acceptable and not have rejections come back for those services. So that's why we put that in here. The other is $100,000 to go toward an ambulance purchase. And as when we're done, and if you have questions on this further, Chief Bryce can probably help me out. We are receiving some funding from Skagit County in early 2021 for our ambulance replacement, but we also do not have an ambulance that's dedicated to like a COVID-19 transport ambulance solely. And so to put eligible funding towards that purchase would help us out now and as we move through the pandemic for the next however much time that we'll be dealing with this, which we think are months to maybe years. Medical grade keyboards and mice, that is for our library so that when we get to the point we can have folks come in and use our public computers, that we have an easy way to sanitize those after each use. Subscriptions to Zoom and WebEx we have added in there. And then the last line item is, it says hotel vouchers for our homeless population, and you'll see for $30,000. So I've been speaking with Skagit County Public Health, Sarah Hinman, specifically. What we were grateful for was the county dedicating funding to serving our homeless population through hotel vouchers for the last couple of months during the county spent about $200,000 to serve folks, and they had a waiting list. But what we found with that was that Erin, our social worker at a police department, was able to engage with folks, make a lot of progress with people that they had a place, kind of a stable housing, if you call it, in the hotel for those 2 months. So in speaking with Skagit County, which I firmly believe it is their responsibility to continue funding if they have that ability, ask them to do that. They agree that they'd like to continue the program. At this point, they have asked FEMA for funding to continue the program. And until they receive an answer from FEMA, they haven't looked at their CARES funding to continue the program. So until they figure it out, I'd really like to move as quickly as we possibly can to serve about 10 people that Erin is currently actively working who are back on the street. If we can dedicate this funding, then we can serve about 10 people for a month. And that I think would be a little bit of a stopgap so that Skagit County can make their decisions. I lean forward to just chat about this with Community Action. They're willing to sit down and work out details to help us out with this since they administered the program for Skagit County. And so that's something that certainly want to discuss with City Council moving forward on. And then we discussed that in our small committee. So that's why I added it onto our document that you're seeing tonight. Why don't I, if it's okay, I'll continue through this and then we can go back and talk through the sections. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So back to our chart on where are we going to reduce expenses. So you'll see here under general government funds, we're trying to find reductions of $5.35 million. There is GEMT revenue, which is the next section that's coming in. And so adding that in of 383. And then the CARES reimbursement, that's that priority $1 amount, which I'll just quickly go right back and point to here. So we would add that revenue back in. And then the expenditure reductions would be as follows. There'd be some continued furlough. There would be staffing cost reductions. That is where we would look at some layoffs. We would also look at continued furlough and concessions with our labor groups if we can negotiate that. The vacancy savings comes from the hiring freeze that is currently in effect right now. We have not frozen police officer positions or the fire marshal position and firefighter paramedics in fire because we think that that would be short-sighted to do that. So these are just positions in other departments. The operational budgeted savings, that's when I went and asked directors to reduce their budgets as much as they possibly could without risk of harm. And that's about 615,000. The ER&R budgeted savings, so council knows or may remember in our budget discussions, not only did we were able to purchase the equipment, but we were able to tuck away, well, at the time, 340,000 for future purchases, but we've brought that back into the general fund. Then there's the general fund portion of the vehicle exhaust system for the fire department. We had looked at adding that to one of our fire stations and matching it with fire impact fees, but we brought that in and suspended that project. And then you'll see the offset and increase for unemployment costs. So that total, we got down to a whole, which if you want to think of it that way, of 1.6 million. And that could be an estimated proposal for fund reserve. However, if you remember our different time frames, certainly we would implement cost reducing measures right now like we have been and then reevaluate after the summer in the August timeframe before, and adjusting as the situation unfolds. So GEMT, so that is our Grand Emergency Transport Revenue, and Council, we've spoken with about that. And just a reminder, it is a federal money that comes through the Medicaid program and helps us offset costs for our ambulance transports. So this actually comes through the Washington State Healthcare Authority. However, it is a federal program through Medicaid, CMS, which is Medicaid. Medicare. We received notification last Monday that our disbursement is $897,000, a little bit more, and that's from applying for fiscal year 2019, which is July 18 through June of 19. And so we have not seen that money yet, but that is what they are saying we are going to receive. So with that funding, the small group committee had a conversation about what would be appropriate to use that for. And so this is where we have a little simple chart. There is a possibility of an audit. Well, actually, there will be an audit next year where they will true up different costs. So we could owe money back to the federal government, or we could get more money from them, or we could just remain the same. But we felt it was very prudent to set aside funding in case that we did owe back, kind of like with your federal taxes. And so that's where suggested 25% of the fund go into reserve to offset anything that could come our way next year. During budget, we kind of talked, I'm pretty sure we talked through some of the other equipment needs. Morgan brought in the Zoll cardiac monitor. I think that was one of the times we discussed that. So there are some important equipment needs for Zoll monitors and gurney systems. That's our little field trip we had out into the front of council about why those gurney systems are important. And so we would like to recommend that we use 290,000 of that to purchase that needed equipment immediately. And then in the general fund, we could put the rest into the general fund to help with our revenue shortfalls that are projected this year. And that's where we came up with the $383,000. And that's the total around 898. And then the last section is just other possible funding. We're certainly not going to stop looking for other ways. The Association of Washington Cities will still advocate to the state legislature on flexibility in funding. Any restricted funds that we may use, lodging tax as an example, to use that to help promote tourism. I think Chief Kamek brought up or spoke about a Department of Justice grant. It's a small grant, maybe $50,000 to $70,000 if I remember right, about equipment. There is a few different FEMA things we're looking at reimbursement for. And then interfund loans could be utilized if we needed to. And then there's always the bank capacity of property tax. But what we wanted to do is come up with a good roadmap so that as other opportunities for funding become available to us, we can shift things around. So for instance, if we're able to achieve some more funding from FEMA, then we could move the CARES money to help us achieve shortfalls. Perhaps there's more federal funding that will come our way. We just don't know, but we really want a good solid roadmap for where we are at this time. So what I'll do is I'll try and make it so I can see more of you at one time and ask if there's any questions or what everyone thinks, or perhaps Mark, Mary, and Aaron want to share anything else that you think I might have missed from our small group discussions.
No, I think you hit everything that we talked about. It was very well thought out and discussed for quite a while. And I think we all were in agreement that this was the right way to move forward.
Okay.
So a couple things you touched on, and one of them was being the use of fund balance. I think we all decided that use of fund balance would be a last-ditch resort. We would go back and meet again within the next 2 or 3 weeks and start analyzing where we're at to see what opportunities have arisen and where we might be able to realize some more savings so that we can reduce or eliminate the use of fund balance. That was one area that we had a discussion on, and the other was in the grant money that's coming from FEMA for the transports. We had some discussion of matter of fact, Chief laid out a kind of a 10-year plan as far as what to utilize those resources for, and part of that was the upgrades to stations 2 and 3, along with a number of other needs. That might be a document that would be good for the balance of the council to see.
Okay. Any thoughts on working with community action on just doing some temporary hotel vouchers?
I think it's a good idea since they have the template already set up and they do this already. They're set up and ready to go.
Mm-hmm. It's something that I think is really needed, and I think we've seen with being able to shelter folks at least temporarily. I think there's been an overall benefit to not only those folks but the community as well. So it'd be really wonderful to be able to continue that. That's why I'm really asking our county to consider some of their CARES funding, just like we're doing, to really dedicate it to that service.
So I think it's important for folks to realize too, this CARES money has very limited places where it can be spent. It has to be related to the virus. And I think that the portion that we've allocated for that is going to serve the most vulnerable in our community. And so I have no issue with that. There's not a lot of places that it can be spent. So this is good use of those funds.
Okay. I'm just trying to scroll through to see if anyone else has. Okay.
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
So what's the process or procedure? Not seen this approach before in a couple of years I've been here. So is there official budget changes? Is this just something that the committee decided? Is this a decision of the council? How's that?
Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, Richard, you went on mute, so I don't know if I didn't catch the last end of the question.
So I think what Richard was asking was, is this a final decision? Did the committee make this decision? These are, committee can't make these decisions. It takes the majority of the council to make these decisions. These are recommendations and really a future work plan on what we need to do the coming months to make up the difference in the shortfalls. So these are going to be, I'm assuming, going to be presented to council at a later date for adoption.
I think it would come in the form of, I'm trying to find Doug's face. It would come in the portion of budget amendments, sort of as we kind of go through the year. And Doug can speak to when, the timing of that would be most appropriate. Doug?
Right. We don't want to spend a lot of time putting budget amendments right now because there'll be a lot of changes throughout the year, as the mayor had said. And so as long as, we're under budget, there still might be some things that we need to do as far as moving things around within the budget that, that the mayor has authority to do that, but it just, if it stays within the fund itself. But anything that we do as far as, this is obviously something new territory for everybody. This is making sure that everybody is in agreement and that everybody understands what's going on. So there would be an overall, some type of a budget amendment that goes forward that everybody would need to approve of, but it would probably be later on in the year.
So a quick question for Doug then. We have this CARES money coming in. We have the GEMT or GEMT revenue coming in. Those aren't budgeted items. Wouldn't it take an act of the council to allocate these funds as they come in to how we've divided those up? And we'd need to do that before we could spend those funds.
That's correct. Yes, we would. So, what I was saying is right now it's a little premature putting forward a budget amendment, but as we get this plan solidified, then we'll know exactly what we need to do later on in this year. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Any of those new funds coming in, we'll have to get those and a budget amendment to be able to use them.
Sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
I have a couple questions. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone that took the time, the council members, the mayor and her staff to go through this. This is not easy. Everything we're experiencing is unheard of. And so I do want to thank you for that. As I look at this, though, I do have some questions. I'm wondering, when we were looking at taking out the vehicle exhaust system, which has been in our CIP for 15 plus years, where was the decision to take that out? And then we've got the GEMT and we're going to put in this other equipment. I'm wondering, are those two separate funds so we can't do that? And then additionally, is this the right time to be buying that equipment? That's $290,000 that could be placed in the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering what the decision was there.
Yeah. So I think it was really a prioritization of what the need was as, presented. The fire exhaust system is certainly something that we could go forward with, but if that's something where we could put that back into the general fund, then that is where the savings sort of came from. It was like looking at everything we were doing. When we looked at the GEMT, you're right, we could take 89,000? I just took that number away. 83,000 away from GEMT and put it toward the exhaust system. We could, but we really felt that at this point, having equipment to respond to medical emergencies would just be a higher priority use of that fund. And so it's not set in stone. It's simply the recommendation that we talked through as the smaller committee.
And I'm not disputing that we need the equipment, but I'm wondering if now is the time for the equipment. I think that we, Mayor, as you have said, we're going to be looking at this months, maybe years. I think it's going to be a heck of a lot longer than months. And so I'm concerned that we're not taking a deep enough dive at this budget. I don't want to get to the end of the year and utilize that $1.5 million of our fund balance, because I don't think we're a third of the way through this yet. I really don't. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we definitely need to be more conservative.
Okay.
Melissa, I couldn't agree more with you. I've said all along that I don't think we should be looking at fund balances as the end solution to make up this shortfall in the 1.5 million short that we're looking at right now. That's why I've encouraged the mayor to continue to work with the committee and with council to continue to look for cost savings. You may be onto something with that equipment. My understanding was that a chunk of that money had to be used for that type of equipment. I may be wrong on that. But I think we have to continue to look at what services we can cut back and how far we're willing to sacrifice some of the services that we currently provide. I don't want to get into October, November and say, oh, geez, we're still $1.5 million short. We got to look at fund balance. So I've encouraged the mayor, and I think the rest of the committee has encouraged the mayor to, this is kind of a first stab at it. It gives us some ideas, but we have to continue working on this to fill that void. And then you talked about the exhaust system. Those GMT monies that are coming in, we've had conversations in council a couple times about those funds. We didn't know whether we were going to be granted those. I mentioned to Chief Bryce last Wednesday when we met that I would like to see us move forward with the improvements at stations 2 and 3 and utilize those funds as a funding source for those upgrades. I suggested to Chief that if we can come up with some dollar amounts, that we may be able to look at some kind of a councilmatic bond to do those improvements sooner rather than later, and utilize this as a mechanism to service the debt on those improvements.
Well, I think I am in agreement. I think that though the way that this has been broken out is that there are, blocks of time that we're looking at for re-evaluating where we are. So like the immediate need, the immediate picture right now, and then June through August, going back through and seeing what happens, because none of us know what's going to happen. So I think that we're on the right track. I hear what you're saying, Melissa, on the exhaust system. I think the public safety is important also, obviously, with new gurneys and other equipment that they need. I know it's it's not an easy decision for any of us.
I know, but the governor just came out today and he's requesting all of his departments to look at a 15% reduction. And so I just don't think now is the time to be buying equipment. I don't disagree that we absolutely need that equipment. Mm-hmm. I was there when we, when they brought the Zoll monitor in, and then we went out and we checked out the gurney system and all of that. I don't disagree with that, but I think that we need to I don't want to get to the end of the year and find out that we've now got to take this money from fund balance, because I'm not there yet. I'm just not there. But I'm only one of 7.
Any of us are. Yeah, I don't think any of us want to take it out of fund balance. I mean, at least that's the way I feel, or I think that we all agree on that.
So this is Richard. It seems like we are having a conversation about the GIMP revenue, a continued conversation there, and maybe looking at the bigger plan that Mark was talking about, and having that as some context before we make decisions on smaller equipment pieces. That's what I was hearing. I wanted to ask a question. I don't have it in my hard copy here. But the new section that was added today in the briefing memo, and it talked about the GIMP and how much would be savings versus spent. And there is 225,000 or something along those lines that would be saved. And I totally understand that this is they give you the money, they true it up, you might owe, and so you better have something to pay that for. Maybe I've got this wrong, but it seems like we could actually use that money fully, knowing that we might have a $225,000 liability that would be covered out of general fund a year down the road. So that would avoid us from having to take $225,000 out of the general fund rather than have that $225,000 sitting in accounts, marked to be used at some later date potentially. So why not use that money to avoid general fund and then have to replace it, know that we might have to replace it out of general fund in a year and a half?
I think because that's a pretty big chunk to have as a liability if we needed to. I was just erring on being really conservative that we set that aside. So we don't have to, but I would hate to come up next year and go, oh, now I have to find $200,000. That's two people. So.
And if I might add also on that, the 225 holding up into a separate fund, this fund will also roll up into the general fund. So it will be part of that reserve. So it'll be something that would be in there that would help us out with our fund reserve also.
Okay, so even if it's earmarked, it's not counted separately. Obviously, I think we're all concerned about we'd like to be moving forward on capital projects and getting bond ratings that are good and, the cost of money, keeping that low.
Hey, I got a question on, it seems like how much were we paying out for the unemployment? Was like 500,000?
I think the liability with the federal is a little bit over 500,000. Yeah.
So are we on the hook when we furlough somebody, or if they actually had their job terminated, then would they go on unemployment security for the state? Is that what's going on here?
Doug can maybe explain it, but we're a city that pays, so we have a real liability when people are either furloughed or laid off for the amount of weeks that we are liable for unemployment. So I don't know if Doug, maybe you can explain it better than me.
Yeah, that's correct. No, the city does not pay for unemployment tax into the state to help fund this. We are on it's kind of like a pay-as-you-go thing. When it's needed, the city has to pay for it. So the mayor's correct that this is an unfunded liability for us. So it comes back to us that we have to pay for all of those that have applied for unemployment.
How long has that been going
on? As
way
long as
before me, yeah.
Yes.
We've been doing that for years.
Oh yeah, way before me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I don't remember that even coming across the grid. So okay.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I was gonna point out, I'm gonna share my screen again here. When we go back to what this is, I'm gonna reiterate again the furlough and the staff reduction costs. We have over 40 people out right now. And so I would argue that we have done everything we possibly can, whereas any additional cuts in employees or operational budgets would put the city at risk or literally shut down services. So I just want to be really clear that when we've gone through to do this was a big deal. If you look at when we did our 19 budget and Doug had done sort of the discretionary, non-discretionary funds, the city general fund budget, and I'm going to find that number here, only had 11% of discretionary budget items in it at all, and that's a total of 3 million. So in looking at if you kind of count up the numbers here, we've taken out pretty much every discretionary budget item that we had, including any kind of travel and training, which makes, of course, tons of sense right now, but taking out any type of professional service and office supplies and things like that. So just want to remind that that's what this means, is these are positions being eliminated. So I think what I would say moving forward is just that having that kind of foundational plan, having the smaller group continue to meet as we have any changes or other revenues that come in, or actuals that come in is going to be really important. The last week of May is going to be very telling. So in the next 2 weeks, we're really going to see the impact of that April March and April tax collections. And so that whole plan might completely be revised at that point. And so it's trying to look forward and be ready for decision making, and instead of just waiting and seeing what happens.
So one thing I would like to suggest is we've got a lot of moving targets here. Some of it has to do with some finance, some of it has to do with public safety. I would like to see if we couldn't arrange a couple of committee meetings via Zoom, maybe a public safety meeting, so we could have a little more conversation about the needs in especially in fire department, but also in police, and see what the consensus of the council is. Which direction do we want to go with capital projects for the fire department? What's the police department need? And make sure council's on the same page, maybe as with the mayor and the chief, on future planning. That might help us to allocate those dollars a little bit better if we have that discussion in a committee meeting. And then in finance, I think it would be good to have some conversation about specific revenues and how those are coming in, and if they're not coming in, why not? I don't know what the rest of the council thinks, but I think a couple of committee meetings where we could have a long kind of dialogue, maybe on those nights that we don't have a council meeting currently. If we were to take a couple Wednesday nights and have those committee meetings, may be beneficial for everyone.
Kevin's going to correct me, but I think under the governor's order, we're not allowed to do, I don't know if we're allowed to do that yet, but tell me, Kevin.
Well, you can still do Zoom meetings so long as the governor's order suspended those requirements in the OPMA, which has been continued. Okay. They said to limit your meetings for things that are routine and necessary, or related to the COVID-19. Now, it sounds like Councilmember Hulse is doing this directly related to the COVID-19. So I think you have a good basis that you're complying with the order. But bear in mind that order, I believe, has only been extended, suspending the OPMA to allow us to virtually meet until the end of the month. Now, if he continues that, certainly you can continue these Zoom meetings. But if he doesn't, then we have to figure out how to comply with these OPMA requirements that you provide a physical meeting space for people. While you can participate virtually, you'd have to provide a physical meeting space for the public. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. So right now, I think you can do what Councilmember Hulse is proposing.
Okay.
I'd like to weigh in too, in that I think that I sure miss our committee meetings and all the good conversations. It seems like there's a lot that is been sidelined, and the longer we wait, the longer that those projects and programs may not be being acted on. So I'd like to see us try to get back to some normal meeting times as well. I understand the constraints that we have, not as well as Kevin, obviously, but we got to work with those.
Yeah, the further away you get from having it directly related to addressing the emergency, the harder it will be to justify it under the governor's order, because the policy tension was they want to promote transparency, and people might not have the opportunity to participate because they don't have the technology. So they're really trying to limit your meetings to those things that are essential to keep continuity of government and address the pandemic. So it's not really business as usual until the order gets lifted. Where the lines are, who knows?
So how about a bond, a fire bond for November that needs to be discussed? Is that not essential business for continuity? Is that so? Where's the line, right?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question with all of these governor's orders, that they are subject to varied interpretations by various jurisdictions and the public. And there's no case law, courts, or definition, but beyond the dictionary we do the best we can to comply with the what would be considered the legislative intent, but the governor's intent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that if we can do them, I would be good with that. It is good information for us to have, and I think it does apply to just where we are budgetarily. It will help us figure things, really understand where things are going.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay. We'll move along then. I think what I heard was that our small finance committee will continue to meet when we've got some new things to look at, which is I'm thinking in the next 2 weeks from now, which is the end of May. We'll look for guidance on being able to start finance committees up, just making sure that we're complying with the governor's order. And that we'll actually come back to that in just a minute when we talk about reopening planning. So that's a good segue into that. And just try and get back to some more of those active discussions as soon as we possibly can. So just want to make sure that if you have questions about things, don't hesitate to call in the meantime. And we'll make sure that we get you updated on whatever you're thinking about. So, okay. The next thing I was going to cover was the legislative priorities. I'd like to lean forward a little bit in thinking that there may be a special legislative session and making sure that we're able to advocate prior to that, and then whenever that may be called. I haven't heard, one way or another. I've had some legislators say they expect one, but they just don't really know when. So, who really knows? But I think they're going to have to make some decisions on their own budgets, and that requires the legislature's assistance from my understanding. So AWC has already leaned forward and put out some guidance on what the legislative parties could be. So that's where I just drafted up a document of our own. And so I'll share my screen here. Okay, nope. I can really figure out how to do this. Okay, there we go. All right. So in your packet, it's our kind of a familiar format for what we've used in the past. And I just thought I'd go over this. This is, again, just a draft. It's just trying to lean forward and be ready. So the first one is just financial support to our cities. We're really grateful for the allocation of the CARES funding to the cities that the governor did, and that we please maintain those critical state shared revenues and continue the sharing of federal funding that could provide fiscal relief to the cities. So until the federal government allocates funding specific for cities, it is all going to the state to make decisions. So we want to make sure that we're still being thought of by the state. Fiscal flexibility, asking for flexibility within existing restricted revenues now, and we put the examples of REIT, maybe you being able to use that for operational expenses instead of just capital, lodging tax, being able to use that for tourism. Oh, I need to I gotta spell check that. And local area small business promotion. So if we can use that to just help like a buy local program or helping our small business, that's the idea there. And then House Bill 1406, the ability to use for immediate rental assistance or hotel vouchers, maybe just some flexibility with that. The regulatory relief, just continued the emergency action by the governor to provide flexibility on the requirements. So that means if there's some PRA, the public records had a little bit of relief there. Things like that is what we're thinking of, especially if we're going to have staff reductions for the rest of the year. Economic stimulus, just looking at providing some capital grants for that economic activity and the special allocations for cities of less than 50,000 in population. Seems like a lot of the capital monies get allocated to big projects in bigger areas. And so making sure the smaller rural areas are thought of, and then making sure that we're helping our most vulnerable residents, emergency rental assistance, emergency housing, and emergency assistance to small business. So that's, again, just a draft, something put together, kind of taking some guidance from AWC so that we're leaning forward and that we're ready. Any thoughts on that?
Hi, it's Richard. So I think these two comments are related. House Bill 1406 and the fiscal flexibility. First of all, this looks great. Thank you so much for putting it together. Totally agree to get ahead of the curve, and they're going to have a tough time when they do get together. So this is good preparation work. On House Bill 1406, that was a small funding source that was set aside to look at housing for those with 60% area median incomes. And it really feels like 1406, we ought to maintain that intent of trying to build stock and capacity, as if COVID's identified anything, it's identified that we need to put more effort into those kinds of programs so that we don't have a big of a problem next time. So I appreciate that there's some immediate needs, but the trade-off would be not planning for the future. So that one I have a little concern about the way it's worded. I think that instead in the bottom of this, where it talks sort of generally about the work we do and asking for additional emergency rental assistance and emergency housing, I would rather not ask them to transform a program meant for something we need, and instead have them give them specific examples at the bottom, such as housing and essential needs programs that are out there for this. So rather than take away something we need, I'd rather focus on building up something that already exists, if that makes sense. So I'd rather not have 1406 in there personally, and happy to talk about that more if folks feel differently.
Any thoughts? I think that might have come from AWC, and just the thought behind it is that it's already a law that grants funding out of, like an existing stream, whereas I think AWC believes that in the recession, they tend to go and cut funding for all these other programs. So if that's something that could be utilized just till the rest of this year for that particular purpose, it might be a more secure funding that could be used. I don't know. I think that's what the thought was, but happy to take it out if that's what council wants, or just not use it as an example.
My thought on 1406 is that it's a tool or mechanism that's been put in place, and we've done the work to collect that money back. It's to help those that are less fortunate, is really what that bill was passed for. And if we don't see any immediate need or any immediate projects that are going to be able to be funded through this, if we're able to help families stay in their homes through the end of the year, it may be a good utilization of that for the balance of the year, and then go back to what the intention of it was in 2021.
We had a work group that met a few months ago and was talking about 1406. So it'd be good to pick that back up again, if given the crisis we're in. I know that's not easy, but the housing and essential needs program that the state provides for, they're putting $15 million a year extra into that program now. And they'll continue to do that, I hope, especially if we reinforce that. So I think that the $30,000 or $40,000 that we're trying to plan for here to help for housing, so that we're not putting people in hotels that cost a lot more than having dedicated housing, is a better financial approach.
I see it. I understand where you're coming from, Richard. I see it more as a temporary assistance that is really needed. That's kind of where I look at that. I mean, I understand the 1406, the concept and where it's going. I just think at this point it would be just for this period, short period of time. If we have that need, let's be able to use it to help people who need the help right this very minute.
I have to agree with what Mark and Mary have said. It's immediate, and we need to we've got some funding available. We need to utilize it.
On the committee, it's actually on, I wrote a sticky note to myself today, had a conversation with Kayla this morning about the 1406, and she had sent some information out about that, and it was a great reminder because we do have to have an ordinance passed by the end of July, kind of outlining usage anyway. So excellent idea, Richard. I had that on my note, and I think we can do Zoom for that. It was, I think, was it, oh, now I remember, Melissa, Gary, and Richard, right? I think I have it written down over on my desk, but I'll reach out, and because I think it is perfect timing to kind of pick that back up. So.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts on the legislative priorities? Okay. Again, just a draft to show tonight and the kind of thinking forward. Been able to reach out to most of our legislators and just kind of keep in regular contact with them. And we'll continue to do that. I think that's important to do. Lastly, wanted to just let you know that we're not thinking about reopening and what that would look like and what we would need to do to protect our staff and our public that may be coming into any of our public spaces. And so there's a small group that is meeting, Chris Phillips and Chief Kamek, Peter. I think there's probably a few more people that I don't remember right now. But what we want to come up with is just a good, simple document to follow and make sure we're thinking through everything really well. So whenever the time frame comes and in whatever phase we would be in, we want to be ready. So I was just going to show you a quick example of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to share my screen again. Just if I click on this, there we go. Okay, whoop. All right. So we're kind of stealing a little bit from other jurisdictions where we've matched the stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 with what the governor's directives are. On the left side, we're thinking through, okay, what does that mean for program services and field operations? What does that mean for public events, any public meetings, folks coming into public facilities? What does that mean for staffing and remote work? The staff physical distancing? Are we going to look at self-screening, employee events, et cetera? So we're just, again, trying to be as thoughtful in working through that reopening plan and making sure we're leaning forward. So a couple examples of things that we're already placing orders for are things like the sneeze guard, pieces of plexi, for employees at frontline, things to put on the floor for social distancing, stand here, I think you've all seen some of these things, signage for our buildings, and just really thinking that through. That's also including thinking through when we're back in council chambers, safely social distance in our meetings and how that would work for the public coming in. So just wanted to just let you know we're thinking about that and putting some time into planning for that as well. So nothing concrete really to share other than that's what our work has been throughout the last week so far. Any questions about that?
Can you put that in our iDrive?
Yeah, that's not done. It's just a draft.
I know.
But
I'd like to look. Okay, that's fine. I just like to look through it. But if it's not ready to share, that's fine.
Yeah, we also have some checklists. So we're going to be going over checklists with each individual employee as we reopen and making sure that we've done our due diligence on educating about, PPE, how comfortable they are at their workstations, and making sure they're signing off on that. And then we have department checklists as well. So each department might have just different situations. And so we want to make sure we're looking at each department. But yeah, I can certainly, it's not any secret, we're just not done.
I didn't think it was. Thank you.
Okay. So that's what I had for the good of the order. I don't know if there's any other questions that may have come up through the course of our discussion from council. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes our agenda items. Kevin, is there a need for an executive session tonight?
Not tonight.
All right. Then with that, we'll be adjourned at 8:39. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.